Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for spending some of your evening with us. This is our Hamilton Hangout, Find Your Future, about the Career Center at Hamilton and how we help students find their path after Hamilton. My name is Ben Rose. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Hamilton and also a graduate, class of '09, and I will be moderating this panel with you. First of all, congratulations to all of our admitted students watching tonight, and of course, parents of admitted students who can share in that joy. We're going to spend some time with a couple of our students and a couple of employees who work in the Career Center at Hamilton, and really let them talk about all the ways in which we help students find their future, get internships, and basically, discover their path while they're at Hamilton. So a few things before I get started. I just want to let you know logistically, I'm going to spend some time asking some questions that we got from the registration form. A number of you had questions from there. And I'll also, at the end, have time for questions that you submit during the course of this webinar. So if questions are coming up that you'd like us to address, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature, and we'll try to address as many of those as we can within our time tonight. So with that done, let's move on to introductions. First of all, I just want to put a shout out to someone you will not see tonight on the panel, but who is here, my colleague, Nikki Barron, a fellow alum, a fellow admission officer. She's going to be moderating the chat and helping to answer some questions that she can just answer right there. But as far as the actual panelists, we'll get started with Melissa. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Everyone, good evening. My name is Melissa Marietta, and I'm the Director of Career Development in the Career Center.
All right. So next we have David Bell.
Good evening, everybody. Congratulations on your acceptance at Hamilton. I'm one of the 4 career advisors. I've been at Hamilton for 21 years and have had the privilege of working with many Hamilton students and alumni, and glad you're here this night joining us.
All right, and then the first of our 2 students, Marvin.
Hello, my name is Marvin. I am a junior. I'll be graduating next spring. I'm excited to be here.
And Marvin, what's your major?
I'm a double major in physics and geology.
All right, and last but certainly not least, we have Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior and I'm double majoring in literature and in Chinese. I've worked in the Career Center over the past few years in a specific section that's industry specific and helps students with introducing informational and networking type of events.
Awesome. All right, so let's start with a really general question. How does Hamilton approach career advising? What's kind of the philosophy that we take, and how does it change between what we're doing with first-year students who are just arriving on campus and seniors? How does it kind of progress during your 4 years at Hamilton?
Start and give just a general philosophy. I think that our philosophy in the Career Center really mirrors the philosophy of the open curriculum. For students who come to Hamilton, it's not prescriptive. So we're not going to say, oh, okay, you need to pick a major in your first semester. Here's all the classes you need to take. Here's the internship you need to have. Everyone has the same resume. Go forward and get a job. We really have a framework that brings transparency and clarity to a process that can seem a little bit overwhelming. But ultimately, the student is the driver. And so we really want to hear about what their skills, values, and interests are. And then we have lots of programs, events, direct support that help guide the student and reflect on the experiences that they're having. So ultimately, the student, again, is the driver of the process, but we're there to support, to guide, and provide resources all the way through. David, anything you want to add to that?
I would say one of the unique things about Hamilton College, and I don't know if there's any other school, NESCAC school or otherwise, that is similar, but we assign a career advisor to each matriculating student, and we work with you over the course of 4 years, so we can kind of develop a relationship with you and spend time with you, and that's kind of a unique quality about the program and the philosophy. It's very much relationship oriented. So we know that students coming to Hamilton, oftentimes they're not really clear on exactly what it is they want to do long term. and students change their mind quite frequently. And so no matter what you're thinking about at the moment, you have the same career advisor to help you through the process, as opposed to a lot of institutions. Today I'm thinking about, I'm interested in geoscience. Okay, you're assigned to David Bell. Next semester, I didn't do too well in geoscience, so I'm thinking now maybe more humanities. Okay, that's going to be Melissa this semester. So our approach is kind of consistency and kind of hanging with you no matter what decision you make and where you are in your career process.
And you asked too about the difference between a first year, sophomore, junior, senior. We have really active first year class, and traditionally we do. I meet with a lot of first years. And so the very first semester, they, as David said, they have a dedicated advisor model. So they just want to come and say hello. We don't expect a student to walk into the office knowing what they want to do. They don't have to say, I have a resume, will you review it? They're just introducing themselves. And as David mentioned, we really get to know the students over the course of the 4 years. We encourage students to be active in doing things, to become involved on campus. And so that's some of the things we focus on in the first year, is just starting to feel comfortable as a student at Hamilton, becoming comfortable being active, thinking about who you are. And then as the student progresses through sophomore, junior year, we're going to be thinking about networking. We can talk a lot more about our Alumni Network, thinking about doing some sort of career-related experience, working up to an internship. And then of course, by the time they're a senior, we're going to be talking to them about what they might want to be doing after they graduate. And just mentioning that it's a circular process. So a student in their sophomore year, might decide that they want to do something, like David said, they change their mind, and that's okay. We meet them where they are. And so that, as David mentioned, I think it's a really unique model that we have, that we work with the students all 4 years, and we meet them where they are. And it doesn't matter, they don't have to go from point A to point B. We will go from point A to Z and then back to A again.
So bringing in kind of Rachel and Marvin on this. So both of you, first of all, have worked in the Career Center. So you could maybe talk a little bit about the role that peers play in that process as well. But also maybe you have some insight as students who have actually experienced some of this too. Marvin, why don't you go ahead and start? Or Rachel, yeah, there you go.
I was just going to say, yeah, I definitely used the Career Center a lot through my 4 years here, and David is actually my career advisor, and he's personally witnessed my interests change all over the place, from finance in the beginning to tech to publishing, and now to, I guess, more of the communications industry. But he's been super helpful throughout that, kind of those changes. And even in my last year, once trying to figure out what am I actually really interested in, he was like, okay, what do you like doing? And so he heard me kind of speak for 20 minutes about what I truly like doing, and he was like, okay, I recommend these few industries for you. But he's also just been helpful with looking for internships and then practicing for interviews too. He's helped me with so many different kind of interviews, from internship interviews to interviews for fellowships. So yeah, absolutely. I think just the Career Center is a very welcoming place where it doesn't matter where you are at, like Melissa said, they're ready to kind of meet you wherever you're at.
Yeah, on a similar note, I think as someone who works in the Career Center, I've kind of gotten the chance to influence how that curriculum is developed. So I think a benefit that I see from the worker side of it is that it is something that is sort of reevaluated as the needs and the times change. Right now, we're currently in the process of redesigning certain parts of the curriculum, or well, not we, but we're being asked to help review. But as a student, I think I have really appreciated how flexible the Career Center's curriculum is. And although my needs have changed, my interests have changed, I've been able to keep a consistent plan. And some of the goals that I set myself career-wise, I want to have this kind of internship or this kind of experiences under my belt by this time in my Hamilton career. I've been able to meet that, and I think it's in part because of how persistent the career advisors are here at Hamilton.
Great. This has been touched on a couple of times. We often get asked, how do you work with students who don't have a specific career in mind, right? or who do change their mind. We talked about kind of the open curriculum and how that philosophy extends to the Career Center. But what would you say to somebody who doesn't really know what direction they want to go, and how do you work with and advise those sorts of students?
Go for it. Oh, David, you want to go first this time?
Go for it.
I really enjoy working with students who come in and say, I have no idea what I want to do, because you can just start the conversation at the baseline. So one of the core pieces of our curriculum, Marvin talked about this before, we've developed a curriculum that helps walk students through each stage of the process. And the first pillar of the curriculum is called Know Thyself. Because if you don't know who you are, then you don't necessarily know where you want to go. Or if you're going somewhere, but it doesn't really resonate with you, then you're probably not going to feel fulfilled or happy in your career path. So some of the basic work that we do as advisors, as well as our student teams that work with students, is just saying, what makes you tick? What do you like? What don't you like? What kind of environment do you want to be in? Talk to me about a typical week. What's exciting to you? What's been boring? What classes do you like? And then through those conversations, we're able to say, like Rachel was mentioning, how David said, I think here are some career paths that you might be interested in. And so we're just saying, why don't you get to know yourself a little bit more? We have tools for doing that. And then once a student has an idea of, here's a couple of things I'm kind of thinking about, then we're going to say, we want you to read up on it more. We want you to talk to people. And then eventually we want you to test it out a little bit. So we actually encourage students to just be open-minded. You don't have to pick one thing. David, what do you say if someone sort of changes their mind or is in between a couple of things? What's your advice?
Well, as someone who had about 10 different majors in college and took 6.5 years to get through, I'm an expert on flexibility and readjusting your thinking. Much of what we do is encourage exploration, which Melissa was talking about. We have a lot of different resources and programs to help students do that, to learn about what a particular career option might look like. We have a group of students that are called our Connect team, and they put on probably about 100 different programs each year involving alumni that are talking about all sorts of different industries. We cover the waterfront. Yes, we do finance, but we also do social work. We also do working in museums. We also do, what it's like to have a psychology major and what kind of options. So much of what we do as an office is provide programs that helps, acquaint students with what kind of options are out there. And students can participate in any one of these programs. We have a shadowing program where students can spend a day or more with an alum just to try to get a feel for what a particular career field might look like. So there's a big emphasis on exploration. Kind of, how do I learn about what kinds of things are out there? If I have a sense for what I think I'm good at, what kind of skills I like to use, what kind of environment I'd like to use from the Know Thyself part of the curriculum, here's a chance to explore what kinds of things might be out there. And we have a lot of students taking advantage of that.
And Rachel and Marvin, I'm not sure if either of you have a specific example of you doing that kind of thing, but Rachel, I know you said you changed majors quite a bit, for example. Can either of you talk a little bit about your own career journey at Hamilton and kind of what led you down that path?
Yeah, so I came to Hamilton wanting to study math and to be on the pre-med track to go to medical school, become a doctor. I think after my first 3 classes, that immediately changed. And so did my career advisor, like right away, since there's a dedicated one for health professions. So I think my experience with that was I had a plan to line myself up to shadow doctors, to engage in different medical things. And suddenly when I changed my academic plans, I was kind of like, I've prepared my career services to get these kinds of roles. And my worry was, can I get other kinds of roles now that I've sort of tailored my resume as a medical student? And I think like it was kind of worrying, not for nothing, but I was kind of exaggerating a bit with myself, because I think sort of having really solid foundations is what let me shift around between different kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, I also have changed since my kind of initial entrance to Hamilton. I came in wanting to do finance. I had this whole plan for myself. And I think Hamilton has a lot of different kind of like career center events and like networking events. And that was really helpful. I went to, I think every year, like, I don't know now because of, COVID, but I remember during my freshman and sophomore year, like DB and like Goldman came up, like, every semester. And so there's these very beneficial networking events where I could like learn more about the industry. And I think around my my interest changed to tech, and I had a tech internship my freshman summer. And then after that, I was like, okay, I don't like that industry either. And so I switched to publishing. And what was helpful really was the David mentioned the Connect team. So they had various different kind of publishing industry related like informational and networking kind of events where I got to meet alumni and hear more about their experience. I actually connected with one of the alumni there, and she was like, hey, I think I have an internship opening up in a couple like months, but yeah, like here's my contact information. We stayed in touch, and then I applied to the company, and she actually ended up being the one who interviewed me. So obviously that was very helpful, kind of like a step in the door. And David prepped me for that interview as well. And then I did a couple more internships in publishing, switched back to tech, and then switched now to like my senior year. I just I didn't like publishing either. So I asked David, I went to him, I was like, look, I've done all these internships, but I'm not really sure what I want to do. But I really love doing research. I've also, like with my internships, I've also done different research projects with professors over the summers. And so I love that, but I don't necessarily want to enter academia. And so he was like, okay, like here are all the different options you have. And so that was very helpful. And then we brainstormed together, and he gave me a couple like paths to follow and some company names too. And through that, actually, I was able to apply to a company he directly suggested through networking with another Hamilton alum. So I'm in the just finished like a final round interview with them too. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, every step of the way, basically like had some kind of career center event or networking with a Hamilton alum or talking with like David. So definitely it's been so helpful throughout like just my various like paths.
Great, thank you. Something that's come up several times is kind of the alumni network and the role that that plays in all this. So I'm hoping we could get a little more information about that. You know, how active are alums in working with our current students? What sorts of assistance do they give? You know, how engaged are they with this whole process, and how engaged are our students with them?
I think just thinking back to like when I talk to my friends who go to other schools, I think they're surprised at how like advanced my career materials are all the time. In fact, the first time I applied for research off campus, I was a freshman at the end of that year. And my response was, we like your materials, but you don't have any research experience, so we can't take you. So actually my first research experience ended up being with Hamilton alums. And then COVID got in the way at that time. So then it ended up being this kind of like hybrid research experience that lasted about 2 months in the summer. We communicated via email, we met on Zoom. She is a physicist at UW-Madison. And then I ended up not liking too much of what she did, but then we were still able to develop a really solid foundation based off of Hamilton. And then she connected me to about 20 of her colleagues in a bunch of other physics fields. So, you know, I think like that was kind of one of my first encounters with just how powerful the Hamilton network is.
Melissa or David, I don't know if you want to talk at all about how you tied in as an administrator in the office.
I'll jump. Hi, David.
I was going to just quickly say much of what we do as career advisors is coaching students through the process. For most college students, the idea of reaching out to somebody they don't know who graduated 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago is a little bit daunting. And so what we do is we coach them through the whole process. We might recommend a specific person, we'll recommend a strategy, we'll work with them on how to reach out. So go through all the mechanics and try to make it as approachable a process as possible, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. But we support students through that whole effort, and Hamilton alumni are great. You know, they're not automatic job or internships at the end of the line necessarily, but they're wonderful for gaining information, gaining kind of exposure to a career area, learning a little bit more about strategies and resources. So it's, great resource, but one of the emphasis is that we coach students through the process so they don't have to do it alone.
So I'm relatively new to Hamilton. I've been with the college just shy of a year, and one of my favorite tools to use with students is called My Hamilton Connect. And it's essentially a huge database of alumni. And it's really a community specifically for Hamilton parents, alumni, and students. And so a student can come in and say, I'm interested in publishing. I heard Rachel talk about that, and other students are interested in that too. We could search by geographic region, we can search by major, or we can search by the publishing industry. And then students can look at a list of alumni. And what I really appreciate about it is, without even talking to the alums, they're providing us with information about themselves. So we look at, okay, what did they major in? What clubs were they in while they were at Hamilton? What is their career path been? Did they go to graduate school? So without even having a conversation with an alum, alums are giving us information about themselves. And what I also love about that tool is they say, willing to talk to a student. We'll look at your resume. As David mentioned, they're really open, the alums are, to having conversation. And as David also mentioned, people are nervous. That's a scary thing, to just email somebody or call them up. But they're really willing. And I always say to the students, just ask them about themselves, and they're going to want to talk about themselves. The other thing too is, as an advisor, we've been doing this for a long time, and so we feel comfortable with it. Marvin is on our discovery team, and so we have our connect team that connects students to alumni for panels on different topics. But if a student's interested in connecting with an alum and they're nervous about it, their dedicated career advisor can help them, but someone like Marvin can walk them through it as well, talk about how to develop that networking email, practice what the conversation is. And what's really beneficial about that is the student is seeing that someone like them, their peer, has been able to do this. And I think that really helps students know that they can do it too.
I also was going to add, I think the unique things about Hamilton is, from day one, you have access to the alumni database of 20,000 alumni. There are a lot of schools, you can't get it until this year or until you do X, Y, or Z, but we provide you access to our alumni database on day one.
Wonderful, thank you. Another thing that's been brought up several times are internship and research opportunities, and obviously those are an important part of kind of preparing for your path after graduation. So how does Hamilton work with students who are interested in those sorts of opportunities? Is there a particular time that they happen? How early can you start on that kind of experience? What's the timing and logistics like for being able to get those sorts of opportunities?
Yeah, I can speak to humanities research. I haven't done any STEM research, but yeah, I usually do in the summertime, and sometimes even the winter, an internship and a research project at the same time, which is a lot of work, but definitely doable. And I would say the internship timeline totally depends on like what industry you're looking at. Obviously, if you're doing something like finance, it's very, very early on. But for like a lot of other industries, you can do that as late as like March, sometimes even like early April. And then with my research projects, I think before I entered Hamilton, when I was like just thinking about research and going to like, tours of different colleges, and they were all saying like, oh, research, like this research program, I had always assumed it'd be like STEM research. And I didn't know like what humanities research was and what literature, which research would even look like. But there are so many different kind of opportunities, even just at Hamilton. that there's just different kind of pockets of funds and centers that will like pay you to do research, which is really great. And so, yeah, like you just apply for that. I think 4 months in advance, and work with a professor to kind of create that proposal and apply for the grant. And if you get it, you're able to do kind of this independent project by yourself. And so that's what I've been doing for the past few years. And and so that you can work more with, I would say, like the academic kind of advisor, and then with the internships, the career advisor has been very helpful with that.
I was going to say a piece of good news. At graduation, historically, about 97% of Hamilton students indicate that they've had at least one internship before they graduate, and about 85% have indicated they've had 2 or more internships. That's the good news. We've coined a phrase at Hamilton called career-related experience, because it's not all necessarily about internships. I mean, that's a key word that's been developed, but there's a lot of other things out there. In the STEM field, you don't have an internship, you do summer research. In some of these fields, they're not formal internships. You might volunteer at a nonprofit. So we have maybe a little bit more holistic view of the kinds of experiences that are helpful for a student to progress in their career field. Pre-med students don't do internships. They volunteer at hospitals. They get certified as EMTs and volunteer with their local emergency service. So it's kind of a more holistic view. One of the challenges is that, a lot of Hamilton students come to Hamilton without a clear idea of what it is they want to do. And so oftentimes there's a little preliminary work that needs to be done with our help, with our curriculum, to try to identify the career area that would make sense for you to try to get an internship in. So it's not just, oh, I'm a first-year student, I don't know what I want to do, I'm just going to go get an internship. There's some preliminary work that needs to be done, and we work with you to try to kind of think through what types of things might be of interest to you, and what are some of the preliminary steps. What kind of organizations might you join? What kind of volunteer experiences might you have, so that when perhaps you apply for an internship, you're actually competitive. You have the foundation that you've built, so an employer will look at you and see, okay, I get this. I see somebody that has taken some steps, and someone who is someone that we would like to have. So it's a process. It's not just jumping straight forward into an internship. Although, as the data suggests, we're very successful at students having those opportunities by the time they graduate.
I want to mention too, we joke as advisors that if we could find the magic book of internships, we would just feel so happy and excited for all of the students. There is no magic book. I like to think that each student is the writer of the book. However, we have an employer engagement team in the Career Center, and they're very active in making sure that they're reaching out to employers and alumni who would be interested in recruiting Hamilton students. So we use a tool called Handshake, and students can go into that any day, any time of the day, weekends, evenings, whatever works for them. They can fill out information on their profile. And so if you're interested in a particular industry, you can change it at any time. We actually will send students customized messages saying, hey, there's this opportunity we think you'd be interested in based on what you filled out in your profile. The advisors have monthly newsletters that we send out, so we're always drawing their attention to different key partners. But I think that's also something that's really important about Hamilton, and that we're really proud of, is that we're always out there bringing our students to the attention of employers. And then, as Rachel mentioned too, and whether it's virtual or if it's in person, we have recruiters come to campus, and we have pretty active recruiting opportunities for students. So if you're interested in something, it's being engaged and talking to employers. If you see a table of an employer on campus, go up to them, have a conversation with them. So again, we don't have a magic book, but we've got a pretty solid book. And if you're willing to engage with it, then I think that students can be successful with that.
Marvin, before we got on, I know you were telling me a little bit about your own kind of research and internship experience. We want to share that story.
Yeah, for sure. So I decided after after dropping away with pre-med that I wanted to pursue physics and go down the research route. I wasn't successful in getting something my first summer, but afterwards, after the alum experiences, I was also able to get research here on campus. So I think that the story of how I got research on campus with a professor really highlights, I guess, some of those other pieces that the Career Center offers in regards to like learning not just how to have a good resume, how to have a good interview, but how to like talk to people and how to sort of make allies with people that will help you with your goals and your path. I think one of the frustrations that I heard a lot from the classmates at this time when we got the research positions was, well, why didn't, like I had the highest grade in the class, why didn't I get the research? And then I think the answer was just that the Career Center always told me, like use your network and talk to the people around you and tell them, your passions, your interests. And that's exactly what I did. I spoke to my professor well in advance and I told him, I'm really passionate about this work. I did not have the highest grade in the class, but I was on the research team that summer. So it was because of that experience that I think now I'm going to be doing more formal research through the research experiences for undergraduates. It's like a program through the National Science Foundation, and I'll be in Chicago this summer doing cosmology research. So I think that all started with my physics professor here at Hamilton.
Great, thank you. Another couple of questions that we really regularly get about internships and career-related experiences, actually, kind of bringing it to that bigger level. Are they paid? Do you get credit for them? And what are some examples of the sorts of things that you might get? Again, we can keep it pretty high level because there's lots of different majors at Hamilton, but what are some things you could throw out?
I was going to say more and more we're seeing internships being paid. I've been doing this for a while, and there was a time when only certain types of industries would pay, and most internships were unpaid. But that has progressed, fortunately, till I think we're at a place where most internships pay. However, if a student finds themselves in an industry that does not pay, such as perhaps a nonprofit or a government agency, the Hamilton Career Center offers funding for those opportunities. We fund well over 100 students each summer. In fact, I think we're at the point where it's rare that we turn a student down if they have a qualifying internship. So finances should not be an issue, even if the opportunity does not formally pay. But as I mentioned, we're seeing more and more opportunities that do pay. Kind of what kinds of opportunities? You're right, Ben. They're all over the place. One of the things I'd mention is that we do have a resource called the Hamilton Peer Internship Network. I know it's a mouthful, abbreviated HPIN. It's an online database where you can see where other Hamilton students have been successful finding an internship. And sometimes one of the things that we find is that peer-to-peer networking can be an excellent way to identify opportunities for yourself. And this resource can help kind of spur some ideas. And, if you're from Connecticut and thinking, well, I might be interested in something that's government or policy oriented, well, take a look and see where other Hamilton students have interned. Are those students still on campus? And maybe you can kind of connect with them and talk to them about their experience and who to contact. So it's a great resource. But we have students doing internships all over the place. We should mention that we have a New York City program and a DC program that take place during the semester, whether it be fall or spring. And an internship is a core piece of that experience. So we have 15 to 20 students each semester doing internships, again, in New York City or DC. And that's another opportunity to get some formal experience as part of your Hamilton education.
Kind of a follow-up question. This one came actually from the audience, but it's so appropriate to the topic, I'm just going to ask it now. we had a student who wondered if our rural location is a downside for getting internship and research opportunities. Could you address that question?
Not at all. Most of our students are not from this area. They're from major metropolitan areas, and they return to those metropolitan areas for the summer. And so we do have resources, both alumni and other resources that help students explore and identify opportunities where they live. Eventually, some students might want to migrate away from where they're from and try an opportunity at another metropolitan area. So we have very few students that are looking to stay locally. Most of our student body are from the major metropolitan areas, or even rurally that perhaps can gain access to a metropolitan area. So I don't see that as an issue at all.
And I think too, and Ben, I was thinking about this as David was talking before, we have a pretty active volunteer office on campus, COOP, and a lot of students start right in their first year. There's an internship program within COOP, and Utica is, a medium size. I feel like I've lived rurally for too long that now I'm thinking that Utica is the big city, but it is a city, and students can get engaged in many community services and nonprofits in that area right from their very first year. And we know from our employer engagement team that the local community is interested in Hamilton. I think that if a student wants to do something locally during the semester, if they can get off campus, then local employers would absolutely entertain that and welcome that. And we do have students who do things locally as well. But, I think there are certainly opportunities for students during the academic year to get out, off of the hill, as we say, and into the community.
And I also want to add, I don't think the rural location is an issue, and I've never personally had an issue with that. But also, I feel like a lot of internships and even jobs have become a lot more flexible these days, and a lot of virtual options. And at least, obviously, because of COVID, I've had a couple of internships that have had to be virtual during the summer. But because of that, I think I have a few friends right now who are doing internships currently at school, but they don't have to go off campus because they're doing it virtually. And it ranges very broadly from publishing to a law firm, to tech too. And so, yeah, I think that's been very helpful too, is the kind of the flexibility of the work from home kind of internship or job.
Okay, great. Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask a question about pre-professional advising in Hamilton. This is sort of related. So if you have someone who's interested in a health profession, pre-law, business, one of those sort of fields where there might be more of a path for what you need to do to go down that route, how is that handled within this whole network?
But I feel like you should talk about pre-health.
I can do that. Since my wife is the pre-health advisor at Hamilton, I know a little bit about it, probably enough to make me dangerous. Yeah, health professions is probably the primary example of a special kind of guidance needed to help students along that path. There are very specific core requirements necessary for all sorts of health professions. And so we have a dedicated director of health professions advising that's very active with students pursuing all sorts of health careers, not only medicine, but veterinary, nursing, PA, physical therapy, whatever it might be. And one of the neat things about Hamilton is that not only do they have a advisor in the health professions, but they also have one of us too. So we kind of tag team a little bit to make sure the student is provided with. So we have a very robust health professions advising system at Hamilton. Law and business are a little bit different in that they don't have the same kind of core requirements as the health professions, you can really major in anything and be a candidate for either business school or law school. And so what we find is that the general career advisors are great resources for both of those career fields. Specifically about business, typically students will work for 2 to 3 years before going to business school. That's usually advised by the business schools themselves. They want students that have had a hands-on experience, and to get into some of the more competitive programs, you need to have worked in business for a couple of years. And so again, career advisors are well positioned to advise and help students with that process. And same thing with law school. We do have what we call a super alum volunteer that's been with us for maybe 10 years, who has a background in law school admissions. And so when a student gets to the point where they're actually considering programs to apply to, we will typically refer that student to this alum kind of for an advising session to kind of think through, based on my metrics, my LSAT, my GPA at Hamilton, what are some of the programs that I'd be competitive for? So that happens kind of a little bit at the tail end of that process. So that's a little bit about, the one other program I'll talk about is pre-engineering. Some students come into Hamilton kind of thinking maybe long-term I'd like to go into engineering. And in the physics department, there's a professor that does a lot of advising. Gordon Jones is his name, on students that are interested in perhaps pre-engineering kind of programs. So that kind of covers the pre-professional advising at Hamilton.
Just slightly related, I know there's a joint degree program with Dartmouth, Columbia, and RPI that Gordon Jones advises under that same engineering belt.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, another sort of change in topic. We have some Jans here tonight. So could you talk a little bit about working with Jan Admits and kind of how that feeds into the program? Can they work with you in the fall before they get here? Like how does that whole thing work out?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the cool things, as I mentioned earlier about Hamilton, is that upon matriculation, you're assigned a career advisor. So you know who you're going to be working with over the course of your 4 years, even if you're a Jan Admit. And fortunately, one of the things that the pandemic has taught us, one of the benefits, is that we can do much of our work via Zoom. And so we are in touch with Jan students who either might be studying in the UK or might be at home or doing something else. We are definitely available to Zoom with you and meet you and kind of start talking about your career plans. And we do that, quite often. And Zoom the technology has enabled us to kind of do that as if you were right, across campus. And so that's the way Jan Admits can start engaging with the Career Center.
Great. So all of this, of course, is in service to helping students develop plans for post-graduation. So could we just briefly touch on that? What sorts of things are our students doing after they graduate? And as far as even categories, are there specific types of fields that people are going into that we could sort of mention?
Well, I feel like David, this is it's your night. David has overseen our very robust outcomes process for many, many years and has his hands on data for, decades, perhaps. I do want to say that, you're not going to see a specific trend of all Hamilton alums do this particular thing. It's really, really diverse. And again, if we were to look at our alumni network and look at My Hamilton Connect, or LinkedIn is another tool that we use, you're going to see that an econ major and an English major might be doing the exact same thing. Maybe they're doing financial investing, or you have someone that majored in the sciences and someone who majored in dance, and they end up working in the nonprofit sector. So, David, of course, you have the data at your fingertips to say if there's something specifically that people go into, but it's incredibly diverse. And we also get a lot of questions about graduate school. David mentioned this as well. Not every student goes directly from undergrad to graduate school. So if we look at our 6 month out, 1 year out, it's not going to trend as high as if we look at, 10 years after graduation, how many people have gone to graduate school. You'll see that number go up significantly. And the reason for that is because if you don't know what you want to do right when you graduate, you don't need to jump right into graduate school. And oftentimes after having a couple of years of experience, that helps you better fine tune what you want to do. So I think that would be kind of my general overview. But David, what are some highlights for you of the data over the years?
Sure. To that point of students not going directly to graduate school, that's one of the trends that we've seen, partly not only because students have to decide what it is they're interested in, but more and more graduate programs are requiring certain levels of experience that require students to work for a couple of years. We've seen that especially in healthcare. It's rare that a student can be competitive for a medical school right out of Hamilton. There's so many things that a medical school is looking for in its candidates that it's hard to squeeze in a 4-year time period. Same thing with business school. Degrees such as international relations, many of these are requiring work experience to be a competitive candidate. So that's one of the trends we've seen over the years. So this past year, I have data for the class of 2021, just a quick breakdown. And we survey students up till about 9 months after graduation. And at that point, about 71% indicated that they had a job. About 5 to 6% were doing some kind of internship. That's a great way if the student really hasn't decided what they want to do and maybe hasn't taken advantage of a formal internship by the time they graduate. That's a way for them to kind of check things out, perhaps the summer after they graduate. And about 6% were doing some kind of internship. 17% were in some kind of graduate program or professional program. About 2% were pursuing what we call a fellowship, let's say a Fulbright, what we call a Watson, some of those, kind of international fellowship, about 2%. 4% were a category, what we call in transition. They've decided not to pursue a job or graduate school. They might be skiing in Colorado. They might be traveling in Europe. They might be prepping for the MCAT, but they're not actively pursuing some specific opportunity. And then only about 1% were still looking for a job. So that's the top level breakdown of this last year. Career-wise, just industry-wise, let me pull open that. So for, and they're not sorted in order, looks like I'm having to read through. About 15% that were actually employed were in a category we call business management. 13% were in education. 12% were in STEM. 10% were in finance, and then 8% in nonprofit. It kind of breaks down from there. So, some of that data has been pretty consistent over the years. It used to be that finance and education were our two top areas, and they were kind of always neck and neck, with kind of education just slightly edging out finance. But things kind of shift around a little bit. But as Melissa mentioned, we have people doing all sorts of wonderful things after they graduate that don't necessarily tie to their majors. One of the things about Hamilton as a liberal arts college, you can decide that you want your career really to be based around your academic studies at Hamilton, but more often than not, that's not the case. You decide you're an art history major that decides to go to Wall Street. You're an English major that goes to medical school. I was a biology major in college, and I'm doing career counseling. So there's not necessarily a direct line from what you study at Hamilton to your life afterwards. You have all sorts of options. And I think our Hamilton alumni kind of well represent the diversity of careers pursued by Hamilton students.
Great, thank you. So we are approaching the end of our time. So we do have a couple of questions from the audience. So I want to make sure I get a chance to ask. So we got this one actually, which I think maybe Marvin, you can answer with your own experience with research, but can students who are not experienced in research do research or find research opportunities, and how do you get experience with research?
Yeah, again, I think since like the research experiences tend to be very competitive, my first recommendation would be to like seek out your professors or seek out the programs that Hamilton offers that that are available over summer. They have summer coding classes and things to add to your resume. You can pick up research as a quarter credit or half credit course in addition to 4 classes. So I think really with STEM research, it's about building a good foundation so that when you do apply for a bigger thing, they can see you've had the check marks there.
We got a question about working with students who are part of the Questbridge Scholars Network. Is there any specific advising you do with that population, or anything you would say about how you work with them?
You know, every single student who's in the Questbridge program is going to have a dedicated career advisor. And, you know, I think we're going to approach working with those students the same that we would our other students too, of going through the curriculum, taking advantage of the programs that we have. But what's really unique about being in a program like Questbridge is that, you know, they're getting, you know, I think they get the message that they should be proactive with what they're doing. And so they do take advantage of our services, and they know that they should come in and they should be active with it. But I think, David, you know, I know you've been at the college a little longer than me, but I think that we're engaging with them in the same way that we are with other students, and having them come in and work with us on a one-on-one basis, but take advantage of all of our programming as well.
You know, exactly. No special programs, but I can tell you that Questbridge students, just because of how they've been identified, are they take advantage of our resources. They're engaged, and they tend to be really successful. And I will say not necessarily because of us, but because of who they are, and they take advantage of the resources that are available to them. They're very proactive. And we'd like to see more of you at Hamilton.
How does the Career Center support students after graduation? Is there someone in particular who works with alumni?
We all do. So if a student has a dedicated career advisor, then we will continue with them, whether it's 2 months after, 6 months, 10 years. You know, David, I'm sure you probably have a story about, you know, someone who was a student and has come back, you know, 10, 15 years from now, but that relationship doesn't end. So, you know, we don't just say, okay, pack your bags, get your job, never talk to us again. You have the opportunity to talk with your advisor and get that one-on-one support. And also, we're going to remind you of all the resources that we have, you know, that you should be talking to the Alumni Network. You're an alum, but that network is still there for you. And especially thinking about COVID as well, you know, and it's been incredibly challenging, and that launch post-graduation is really different than it's been, you know, prior to 2020. So we're paying special attention in the summer as well. The advisors are there all year. So if someone were to call us in July, we're going to pick up the phone, we're going to answer that email, and we're going to be available. So, you know, we know that if it's hard with the transition, that we want to be as available as possible, not to all of our alums, but specifically thinking about our younger alums and our new grads too.
Yeah, I had an advisee that had graduated, and she emailed me very sheepishly just 2 weeks ago. She said, I depended on you and the Career Center so much, and I've graduated. What do I do now? Who do I go talk to? Is there somebody you can refer me to? Is there some kind of service I can pay for? And I go, Anna, let's set up a Zoom call. I'm still your advisor. And we jumped on a Zoom call and we talked about her interest in going to grad school. So yes, that relationship continues. And one more thing that we add, we talked, generally about the Alumni Network, but we have the Hamilton Career Network is more than an amorphous group of people out there, potential. We have active alumni that do programming for alumni and with alumni every month, according to the different industries. So it's an excellent resource after you graduate to plug into this group of alumni that have common interests, common professional interests that you have, that you can attend a program and get to know some of these people and learn about the industry that you're pursuing. So again, another great resource for alumni after they've graduated.
Thank you. So we are running up against time. So I have one final question for the entire panel. And Rachel, maybe we'll start with you. Could you all just say, what is the piece of advice you would give to our soon-to-be first-year college students about career planning? What would you say to them if you could tell them one thing? I did put you on the spot, Rachel. You don't have to go first if you need a second.
I mean, this is a pretty basic one. I think everyone says it, but it's never too early to start anything, whether it is start going to the Career Center and saying hi to your advisor, or starting to network, or even thinking about internships. It's always good to think about it, and to just not be scared at all of going to the Career Center or taking advantage of the opportunities at Hamilton. Or I feel like there's so many opportunities here that I would go to more if I could, but a lot of them conflict with other events. But I think every single event I've been to has been so helpful.
I'm going to jump in before someone takes my idea, and it's kind of really keying off of what Rachel said. I honestly believe the key to success is engagement. There are so many opportunities to engage, not just with the Career Center, with amazing student organizations, with things that are academically oriented. I find the student that's the most successful is the student that has truly taken advantage of all the resources and opportunities and engaged at Hamilton. The student that just goes to classes and just kind of does, I understand that, but it's the engagement outside the class that really provides that wealth and that foundation that the student can build on. One of the typical questions I'll ask a student as they come in, what do you do outside the classroom? And I hope they give me a litany of things that they're involved in. So it's so much easier to help that student than, no, I don't do anything. I just take courses and I just hang out in my room. They're harder to help. So engage while you're here, because there are wonderful opportunities.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, David. I was going to take that exact same point. But I think just slightly different. You'll get a lot of emails during your first semester, during your first year. Come to this, do this. We have a workshop, a set of workshops that happen right before the breaks, where the point of it is to try to get you to apply for things. I think be open to that. That's my advice, and try them the first time, because I think a part of why I was successful later on is because I failed early on, but had sort of that backdrop here at Hamilton with the Career Center.
I definitely piggyback on Marvin and say open is one of the biggest things for me. I also, if you end up coming to Hamilton and I'm your advisor, you will hear me say this again. This feels so overwhelming. I have to go to college. I have to live away from home. And now you're telling me I need to figure out what I'm going to do when I graduate. I haven't even started yet. So take it in small chunks, 15 minutes. Maybe you start with 15 minutes a week. I like to tell students 15 minutes a day. Do one thing. So is that watching a YouTube video on something that's interesting to you? Is it reading an article? Is it reading the newspaper? Is it having a conversation with someone? What if you have a friend and their parent does something that you're interested in? Ask her for dinner. Can I ask you a couple of questions? I find that over time, doing these small steps helps it feel, the overall process feel less intimidating. So my overall advice to get started is just spend 15 minutes a week thinking about something related to what you might want to do in the future.
Wonderful. All right, thank you so much. With that, we're going to close our panel discussion tonight. I hope you've all found it helpful. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and congratulations again on being admitted students. A few little housekeeping things. First of all, a nice virtual round of applause for our wonderful panel, which did such a great job answering questions tonight. Second, we are holding virtual events like this very regularly throughout this month. So feel free to check out hamilton.edu/explore for future events. We're going to put that link in the chat for you as well if you'd rather have it in that way, as well as recordings of past events, which you might find helpful. In addition, if you have additional questions about Hamilton, you can always email us at admission@hamilton.edu. And we'll also put an email address to our Career Center if you have specific questions you would like to ask those people on this panel, for example, to answer in email format. You can certainly reach out to that. And again, we'll put that in the chat as well for you. So thank you very much again for attending our panel, and have a great night.